The
Autumn in
people who gave you life
Philadelphia
are the same
always
ones who
felt
try to
like
erase
borrowed
it. Before
time.
we dive in, I
The
want to know where are you
crimson
watching
leaves
from?
would cover
Have
the
you ever had to fight
sidewalks
for
for
your place?
maybe 2 weeks before the November rains washed them into the gutters, and winter would arrive unannounced, cold and unwelcoming. It was late October when my life collapsed, though I didn't know it yet. I was 28 years old, an ICU nurse at Riverside Hospital, and I had just finished another 12-hour night shift that left my feet aching and my mind numb. My name is Bryony Scott. My father is Cormac Scott, a CEO of a trading firm who traveled constantly for work. My mother is Alara Scott, a woman who never worked a day outside our home, but somehow always seemed exhausted. And my younger sister is Viraya Scott, 25, beautiful, and the sun around which our family orbited. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled, and please, stay with me until the end. The hospital clock read 6 a.m. when I logged out of the system. My shoes were still damp from yesterday's rain, and my scrubs smelled like antiseptic and coffee. Laura Matthews, the head nurse, caught me at the door. "Bryony, you doing okay?" she asked, her eyes crinkling with concern. "You've been pulling doubles all week." I forced a smile, the kind I'd perfected over years of practice. "As long as I make it to my bed, I'll survive." "Any plans this weekend? You need rest, honey." I shook my head. "My mom and sister just got back from Florida yesterday. I've got some family obligations." Laura sighed the way she always did when I mentioned my family, as if she knew something I didn't want to admit. "Grace yourself some grace, Bryony. You can't pour from an empty cup." The irony of the advice wasn't lost on me. I'd been running on empty for years. The bus ride back to my one-bedroom apartment in West Oak Lane was freezing. The heater was broken again, and there were only 3 other passengers at this hour. A man in a construction uniform, a woman with grocery bags, and a teenager with headphones turned up so loud I could hear the bass from 3 rows away. I leaned my head against the cold window and watched the city wake up. My apartment was small but clean. I kept it that way because chaos at work was enough. I needed order somewhere in my life. On my refrigerator door, held up by magnets, were 3 postcards from my father. The most recent one showed the Chicago skyline at night, all glittering lights and architectural pride. He'd written on the back, "Wrapping up the final phase here. Miss you, my strong girl. Dad, Chicago." Not Vancouver, where my mother had told me he was. I stared at that postcard for a long moment, something uneasy turning in my stomach, but I pushed it away. Dad traveled so much that keeping track was impossible, and Mom handled all the communication with him. She was his wife. She would know. My phone buzzed. "Mom." "Bryony, don't forget we have dinner tomorrow night at 6. Viraya's boyfriend is coming over. Jeff Morrison, the lawyer I told you about. I need everything perfect." I closed my eyes and counted to 5. "Aren't you just back from Florida?" "We got back yesterday, but this is important. Jeff's schedule opened up suddenly, so we're doing it tomorrow. You'll handle the cooking and setup, won't you? Just make the dishes Viraya likes, and please make sure the house is spotless." "Mom, I just worked 12 hours. You're 28 years old and a nurse, Bryony. This shouldn't be difficult for you." Her voice had that edge it always got when I came close to saying no. "I can always count on you. You're the responsible one." Responsible, stable, reliable. These were the words my family used to describe me, and they felt less like compliments and more like chains. "Okay," I said, because I always did. "I'll take care of it." "Good. Don't stress Viraya out about it. You know how sensitive she is." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my quiet apartment holding my phone and felt the familiar weight settle over me. This was my role. The one who took care of things. The one who showed up. The invisible daughter who kept the wheels turning while everyone else got to shine. There was a memory that surfaced sometimes, unbidden. I was 7 years old, riding my bike down the steep hill near our old house. The brakes failed. I remembered the terror of picking up speed, unable to stop, and then the crash at the bottom. A broken arm, 6 weeks in a cast, and my mother's face when she came to the emergency room. Not worried, not frightened, but annoyed. "You need to be more careful, Bryony. Your father's in Tokyo, and I can't handle this alone." Even at 7, I'd felt it, the sense that I was an inconvenience, a problem that kept presenting itself. Saturday afternoon arrived too quickly. I showed up at my mother's house at 2 o'clock with grocery bags full of ingredients. The house was a beautiful colonial in Chestnut Hill, 4 bedrooms and a manicured lawn, the kind of place that looked perfect from the outside. Inside, Ilara was on the sofa with her phone, barely looking up when I came in. "You're late," she said. I was 10 minutes early. "Sorry, traffic." I set the bags down in the kitchen. "Where's Varaya?" "Getting her hair done. She'll be back by 5. Mom finally glanced at me. "Did you remember the smoked salmon and the organic red wine? Jeff is particular about wine." "Got it all." "Good. And Bryony?" She stood up, smoothing her cashmere cardigan. "Don't mention anything to your father about this dinner. He's in Vancouver on that big project and I don't want him distracted." That unease twisted again. "Chicago," the postcard had said, but I nodded. Of course. The next 4 hours were a blur of cooking, cleaning, and arranging. I made herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables with balsamic glaze, a kale and quinoa salad, and a chocolate mousse that took 45 minutes alone. The dining room table was set with the good china, fresh white tulips in a vase, cloth napkins folded into neat triangles. My hands were raw from scrubbing, and I'd cut my finger on a wine glass while washing them. I wrapped it in a bandage and kept working. At 4:30, I sat down for the first time in hours. My back ached. Sweat clung to my hairline. The kitchen sparkled. The table looked like something from a magazine, and I felt nothing but tired. The door opened at 5:15. Varaya walked in first, wearing a fitted emerald dress that made her eyes pop, her honey blonde hair in perfect waves. She looked like she'd stepped out of a salon ad. "Oh my God, it smells amazing!" She swept into the kitchen, then stopped. "Wait, no risotto? I told Jeff you make the best risotto." I stared at her. "You never asked me to make risotto." "I texted you." "No, you didn't." She pulled out her phone, scrolled for a moment, then frowned. "Well, I meant to. Can you make some real quick?" "Viraya, it takes 45 minutes. "Never mind." She sighed dramatically. "Jeff will just have to deal." Mom came in behind her, already dressed for dinner in a silk blouse and pearls. She surveyed the table, the food, the flowers. Her face remained neutral. "It's acceptable," she said finally. "But what's with the napkin folds? They look sloppy." I'd spent 20 minutes on those napkin folds, watching a YouTube tutorial twice. "I'll redo them," I said quietly. Jeff Morrison arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. He was handsome in that polished corporate way, pressed suit, perfect smile, firm handshake. He greeted Ilara warmly, kissed Varaya's cheek, and then his eyes landed on me. "You must be Bryony. Varaya's told me you're a nurse. ICU, right?" "Yes, Riverside Hospital." "That must be incredibly demanding work." He actually seemed interested. "How do you handle the stress?" Before I could answer, Varaya linked her arm through his. "Bryony's like a machine. Nothing phases her. Come on, let me show you the house." Mom smiled at me as they walked away. "Why don't you finish setting up? We'll eat in 20 minutes." I wasn't invited on the house tour. I was the help. Dinner was fine. Jeff complimented the food, Varaya glowed, and Mom held court at the head of the table, telling stories that painted Varaya as a prodigy, and me as the dependable but unremarkable older sister. I ate quietly, refilled wine glasses, and cleared plates. At one point, Jeff turned to me again. "Your mom mentioned you dropped out of business school to pursue nursing. That must have taken courage." Mom laughed lightly. "Oh, Bryony has always been practical. Not everyone is meant for high-level careers. Nursing is very respectable." Nay, the way she said respectable made it sound like mediocre. Jeff seemed to sense the tension. He didn't push further. They left around 8:30. I started cleaning up immediately.
My name is Renata
Scraped
Martinez,
plates,
and this is the
loaded
story
the
of how I learned that
dishwasher,
sometimes the people
wiped
who gave
down
you life are the
counters.
same ones who
Mom
try
and
to erase it.
Varaya retreated to the living room to discuss how well the evening had gone, their voices bright and animated. I was washing the last of the wine glasses when my hand slipped. The glass had a chipped edge I hadn't noticed, and it sliced across my finger, deeper than the earlier cut. Blood bloomed instantly, running down into the soapy water. I stood there, watching the water turn pink, and something inside me cracked. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet splintering like ice forming on a window. Behind me, Mom called out, "Bryony, don't forget to wipe down the windows tomorrow. There are smudges. It looks tacky." I didn't answer. I just rinsed the blood off, wrapped my finger in gauze, and quietly went upstairs to my old bedroom, the one I'd grown up in, with its faded wallpaper and narrow bed. I sat in the dark, leaning against the wall, and stared at my bandaged hand. I wasn't waiting for anyone to ask if I was okay. I'd stopped waiting for that years ago. All I wanted was to leave, to find some quiet place where kindness wasn't drained in the name of family. Sunday arrived with cold rain that didn't let up. I woke at my apartment to 3 missed texts from the hospital. Daniel Wright's daughter had spiked a fever, and he needed someone to cover his overnight shift. The message was apologetic, urgent. I should have said no. I should have told them I'd worked 12 hours 2 days ago and cooked an elaborate dinner yesterday. I should have put myself first, but I texted back, "I'll take it." At the hospital, at least, I mattered. The shift was brutal. We had 2 trauma cases, a cardiac arrest, and a teenager who'd overdosed on fentanyl-laced pills. By 7 a.m., I was running on fumes and black coffee, but I'd saved lives. I'd made a difference. The rain was still coming down when I left. The streets were slick, the traffic lights blurred through my exhausted eyes. I wrapped my scarf tighter and started the 4-block walk to my apartment. I never saw the truck. One moment I was crossing Broad Street, thinking about my bed. The next, headlights swung toward me, impossibly bright and impossibly close. There was a screech of brakes, a sound like the world breaking apart. And then, nothing. The emergency room at Riverside Hospital was already crowded when the call came through at 7:30 a.m. Dr. Amelia Roberts, head of emergency medicine, had just started her shift when the radio crackled to life. "Female, 28, multiple trauma, victim of traffic collision, deep coma, ETA 4 minutes." Amelia grabbed her trauma kit. "Okay, people, let's move. Bay 3, full resuscitation setup." The gurney came through the doors fast, paramedics still doing chest compressions. The woman's face was swollen and bruised, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. Her clothes were torn, soaked with rain and blood, and there were shards of windshield glass embedded in her shoulder. Laura Matthews, who'd been restocking supplies, came running. She took one look at the patient and stopped dead. "Oh, God, that's... Dr. Roberts, that's Bryony!" The entire ER seemed to freeze for half a second. "Grace Miller?" someone whispered. "Our Bryony?" Amelia's face went pale, but her training kicked in. "I don't care who it is. This is a patient, and we're going to save her. Let's go!" They moved like a machine. IV lines, intubation, blood transfusions. Bryony's injuries were catastrophic. Liver laceration, broken femur, internal bleeding, signs of brain swelling. While they worked, Laura pulled Bryony's employee file from the system, looking for emergency contacts. Primary contact, Alara Scott, mother. Laura dialed the number with shaking hands. The phone rang 4 times before a sleepy, irritated voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Scott? This is Laura Matthews from Riverside Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter Bryony. She's been in a serious accident." "What time is it?" Alara interrupted. "I'm supposed to meet Varaya at the spa in an hour." Laura blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Ma'am, your daughter is in critical condition. She was hit by a truck, she's in a coma, and we need a family member here immediately." There was a pause. "How serious is this, really? Bryony's strong. She's a nurse. I'm sure she knows how to handle—" "Mrs. Scott, Bryony is unconscious and on life support. This is not something she can handle. We need you here now." A long sigh came through the phone. "This is very inconvenient. Varaya's dog is at the groomer, and we have to pick him up by 10. I suppose I could stop by this afternoon." Laura's hand tightened on the phone. "Mrs. Scott, your daughter might not—" She stopped herself. "Please come as soon as possible." "I'll try." The call ended. Laura stood there, phone in hand, her face a mask of disbelief. Dr. Roberts looked over from where she was reviewing Bryony's scans. "Did the mother hang up on you?" "Worse. She said she'd try to come, after the dog groomer." A nurse nearby made a sound of disgust. Amelia's jaw clenched. "Then we're her family now," Amelia said quietly. "Everyone on this floor knows Bryony. We take care of our own. The surgery lasted 6 hours. They repaired the liver laceration, stabilized the internal bleeding, set the broken femur. But the brain swelling was concerning. Very concerning. When they wheeled Bryony to the ICU, Jennifer Foster, her closest friend from the nursing staff, was already waiting. She'd been called in on her day off. Her eyes were red. "How bad?" she whispered. "Bad," Amelia replied. "She's stable, but the next 72 hours are critical. If the brain swelling doesn't go down—" She didn't finish the sentence. Jennifer pulled a chair up to Bryony's bedside and took her hand. "I'm not leaving." The first day passed. No family came. The second day, still no one. On the third day, Laura tried calling again. This time, Varea answered. "Scott residence." "This is Riverside Hospital calling about Bryony Scott." "Oh, Mom said Bryony had a little accident. She's fine, right?" "I'm actually in the middle of something." "Miss Scott, your sister is in a coma. She has life-threatening injuries. Your mother hasn't come to the hospital." "Really?" Varea sounded distracted. "That's weird, but Mom said Bryony's tough. She'll be fine. Listen, I have a client meeting in 10 minutes. Can I call you back?" She didn't call back. By the fourth day, Jennifer had practically moved into the ICU. She worked her shifts and then sat with Bryony during her breaks, sometimes past the end of her shift. She brought the stuffed bunny from Bryony's work locker, a small white rabbit that had hung from her backpack since her first day, and placed it on the bedside table. "Bryony, if you can hear me, don't give up," Jennifer whispered, holding her hand. "Everyone here is fighting for you." On the fifth day, Bryony's finger moved. Just a twitch, barely noticeable. But Jennifer saw it. "She's in there," she told Dr. Roberts. "She's trying to come back." They increased the monitoring, adjusted medications, watched and waited. On the sixth day, Bryony's eyelids fluttered. On the seventh day, she opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Jennifer's face, streaked with tears. "Hey," Jennifer whispered. "Welcome back." Bryony tried to speak, but the breathing tube prevented it. Her eyes moved around the room, the machines, the IVs, the sterile white ceiling. Then her gaze found Jennifer again, and the question in her eyes was clear. "Where's my father?" Jennifer's face crumpled. "We couldn't reach him, honey. The only contacts in your file were your mom and sister." Bryony's eyes closed, and a single tear slid down her temple. On the 8th day, 8 full days since the accident, Alara and Varea finally appeared. They arrived mid-morning, both carrying shopping bags from designer boutiques. Varea was in athleisure wear from some expensive brand, and Alara had clearly just come from a salon appointment. Laura intercepted them at the ICU doors. "Mrs. Scott? Miss Scott, it's been over a week." "We've been very busy," Alara said coolly. "How is she?" "She woke up yesterday. She's confused and in pain, and she's been asking for her father." "Oh, well, we can't bother Cormac. He's in Vancouver on an important project." This would just distract him. Alara said it as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Laura wanted to scream. Instead, she handed them protective gowns. "You can see her for 15 minutes. She needs rest." They entered Bryony's room as if visiting a distant acquaintance. Varea wrinkled her nose at the antiseptic smell. Alara stood at the foot of the bed, maintaining a careful distance. "Bryony, you need to get better soon," Alara said, her tone flat. "You're worrying Varea." Varea leaned in slightly, not quite close enough to touch. "Don't tell Dad about this, okay? He's under so much pressure with the Vancouver project. We don't want to stress him out." Bryony stared at them both, unable to speak through the oxygen mask. Her eyes were glassy with tears, and something else. A dawning realization that carved itself into her bones. Jennifer stood in the corner, her hand resting protectively on Bryony's shoulder. A silent promise. You're not alone. Less than 15 minutes later, they were gone. Alara barely unbuttoned her protective gown before she was out the door, heels clicking sharply down the hallway. Varea followed, already scrolling through her phone. Bryony turned her face away from the door. When Jennifer leaned close, she heard a whisper, barely audible. "Find my father, please." Jennifer squeezed her hand. "I will. I promise." And that's when everything truly began to unravel. Jennifer didn't waste time. The moment my mother and sister left the ICU that 8th day, she pulled out her phone and started searching. I watched her through the fog of pain medication, my throat too raw from the breathing tube to ask what she was doing. "Your employee file only lists your mom and Varaya as emergency contacts," she said, not looking up from her screen. "But I remember you mentioning your dad, Cormac Scott, right? CEO of a trading firm?" I managed a small nod. "Okay, let me see what I can find." She started with LinkedIn. It took her less than 5 minutes. Found him, Cormac Scott, Senior Advisor at Thornfield Trading Group. She scrolled down, then froze. Bryony. His location says Chicago, Illinois. Current position since 3 months ago. My heart stuttered. The postcard on my refrigerator flashed in my mind. The Chicago skyline, the words, "Wrapping up the final phase here." Not Vancouver, Chicago. My mother had lied. Jennifer saw my expression change. "What is it?" I couldn't speak yet, so I gestured weakly at her phone, then at myself, trying to communicate. She understood. "You want me to call him?" "Yes." God, yes. She found the company's main number and called. A professional voice answered. "Thornfield Trading Group. How may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with Cormac Scott, please. It's a family emergency." There was a pause. "May I ask who's calling?" "My name is Jennifer Foster. I'm calling from Riverside Hospital in Philadelphia regarding Mr. Scott's daughter, Bryony." Another pause, longer this time. "Please hold." The hold music played for nearly 2 minutes. When someone finally picked up, it was a woman with a warm but concerned voice. "This is Lorraine Taylor, Mr. Scott's executive assistant. What's happened to Bryony?" Jennifer explained, the accident, the coma, the 8 days that had passed. As she spoke, I heard Lorraine's sharp intake of breath. "8 days? But I don't understand." "Mrs. Scott called the office last week. She said Bryony had the flu and would be out of work for a few days. She specifically told us not to bother Mr. Scott because it wasn't serious." The room tilted. Even through the medication, I felt it, the full weight of betrayal. Jennifer's voice went cold. "Mrs. Scott lied. Bryony was hit by a truck. She nearly died, and no one from her family came to see her until today." "Oh my God!" Lorraine's voice shook. "Mr. Scott has been in Chicago for the past 2 weeks. He's been asking about Bryony, actually. He was supposed to fly home next week, but if I'd known—" "Can you get him on the phone? Now?" "Immediately." 10 minutes later, my father's voice filled the room through Jennifer's speakerphone. "Bryony? Baby girl, can you hear me?" I couldn't speak, but I made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. "I'm here, Dad." Jennifer spoke for me. "She can hear you, Mr. Scott, but she can't talk yet. The breathing tube—" "Why didn't anyone call me?" My father's voice cracked. "I've been in Chicago this entire time. I'm 2 hours away by plane. I could have—" "Your wife told the hospital not to contact you. She said you were in Vancouver and couldn't be disturbed." The silence that followed was deafening. When my father spoke again, his voice was different, harder. "I'm booking the next flight. I'll be there in 4 hours. Jennifer, is it? Please don't leave her alone." "I won't, sir." "And Jennifer? Thank you. For everything." After he hung up, Jennifer sat back down beside me and took my hand. "Your dad's coming. He didn't know Bryony. He had no idea." A tear rolled down my cheek, hot and fast. But it wasn't entirely from relief. A question was forming in my mind, terrible and persistent. What else had my mother lied about? I was moved out of the ICU 3 days later. The doctors wanted to keep me for observation, but I was breathing on my own, and the brain swelling had gone down significantly. My father arrived that first evening and barely left my side. Cormac Scott was 55, tall and lean, with silver threading through his dark hair. He looked exhausted when he walked into my room, his tie loosened, his eyes red-rimmed. When he saw me, bruised, bandaged, barely able to sit up, he broke. "My baby girl," he whispered, pulling a chair close to my bed. "I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. I should have—" "Not your fault," I managed to rasp out. My voice sounded like gravel. Your mother told me you had the flu. She said you were fine, just needed rest. His jaw clenched. I asked to speak to you directly, but she said you were sleeping. I believed her. I wanted to tell him everything, about the years of being invisible, about the dinner where I'd been treated like a servant, about the 8 days I'd spent in a coma without a single family member by my side. But I was too weak, and some part of me was still afraid. Afraid of rocking the boat. Afraid of being told I was overreacting. Instead, I asked, "Why did Mom say you were in Vancouver?" Dad frowned. Vancouver? I finished that project 2 months ago. I've been in Chicago since September, consulting remotely.
The people
I
who
was
gave you
supposed to
life
fly
are
home
the same
next
ones who
week for
try to
your
erase it.
birthday.
Before we dive in, I want
My
to know where are you watching
birthday.
from? Have you ever
October
had to fight for your
29th,
place?
4 days away. My mother knew that. Did she? I swallowed, my throat aching. Did she tell you about the dinner? With Varea's boyfriend? What dinner? Of course she hadn't. Dad stayed for 3 hours that night, holding my hand, telling me about Chicago, about the architecture and the deep dish pizza he'd tried. Normal things. Safe things. But I could see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior, the way his jaw would tighten whenever I mentioned Mom or Virea. When he finally left to check into a hotel, Jennifer came back. She'd waited in the hallway, giving us privacy. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Confused, I admitted, and angry. And, Jennifer, I need to know something. When you pulled my employee file to find emergency contacts, did you see anything else? Any other documents? She hesitated. Like what? I don't know. Anything that seemed off. Jennifer studied me for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. I did find something weird. When I was looking up your dad's company, I did some general searching on your family name, public records, that kind of thing. I probably shouldn't have, but she handed me the phone. I found this. It was a legal document filing, publicly accessible through the Philadelphia County Records database. The header read, Scott Family Trust, amendment filed. The date was 6 months ago, April. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through the document. It was dense with legal language, but certain phrases jumped out. Revision of beneficiary designations. Primary beneficiary, Virea Scott, 70% of estate assets. Secondary beneficiary, Alara Scott, 20%. Charitable trust, managed by Alara Scott, 10%. Previous beneficiary, Brian E. Scott, removed per amendment request. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. But the words didn't change. I'd been written out of my father's will entirely. Bryony? Jennifer's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you okay? You're really pale. My dad didn't know about this, I whispered. He couldn't have. He would have told me. The signature on the filing is his. I looked at it, the scrawled signature at the bottom of the digital copy. It looked like his handwriting, but something was off. The loop on the C in Cormac was too wide, the final T in Scott too abrupt. That's not his real signature, I said. It's close, but it's wrong. Jennifer leaned in. Are you sure? I've seen my dad sign things 1,000 times. This isn't right. I scrolled back up to the document details. Look at the witness name. Nathan Pierce, attorney at law. Do you know him? A memory surfaced, uncomfortable and vague. Nathan Pierce, tall, silver-haired, always smiling. He'd been at family dinners occasionally, always sitting too close to my mother, laughing too loud at her jokes. He's a family friend, I said slowly. Or at least, that's what Mom always called him. Jennifer was already typing on her phone. Nathan Pierce, attorney. Okay, here he is. Specializes in estate planning and trusts. Office in Center City. She kept reading. Huh. He got divorced last year. Pretty messy, according to this article. His ex-wife claimed he'd been funneling marital assets into a secret account. Something cold settled in my stomach. Jennifer, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need to get out of here. Not permanently, just for a few hours. And I need to go back to my mother's house. Bryony, you can barely walk. I need to see something. Please. She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. I'll talk to Dr. Roberts. But if she says no, that's final. Deal? Deal. Dr. Roberts did say no initially, but when I explained, or at least explained enough, she relented with conditions. I could leave for a maximum of 3 hours. I had to be in a wheelchair, and Jennifer had to stay with me the entire time. And if you show any signs of distress, dizziness, nausea, confusion, you come straight back. Understood? Understood. We left the next afternoon. Dad was back in Chicago for a day to handle some work emergency, so he didn't know about our plan. Jennifer drove her Honda Civic carefully through the city, and I sat in the passenger seat, every bump in the road sending shocks of pain through my healing body. Chestnut Hill looked exactly the same, wealthy, pristine, unchanged. The trees were losing their leaves, carpeting the sidewalks in red and gold. Jennifer parked 2 houses down from my mother's place. "What are we looking for?" she asked. "I don't know yet. But if that will was forged, there might be other documents, evidence. This feels like breaking and entering. It's my childhood home. I have a key." I pulled it from my pocket, a brass key I'd carried for years, even after moving out. "Okay, Nancy Drew, let's do this." Getting into the house was easier than I'd expected. It was 3 o'clock on a weekday. Mom would be at her book club, and Varaya would be at work, or a coffee shop, or anywhere she could take aesthetically pleasing photos for Instagram. The house smelled like vanilla candles and my mother's perfume. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The cream-colored furniture, the abstract art on the walls, the family photos that featured Varaya prominently and me in the background. "Where would she keep important documents?" Jennifer whispered, even though we were alone. "Dad's office. Upstairs." We took the stairs slowly, me gripping the railing with white knuckles. My father's home office was at the end of the hallway, a room lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets. The desk was organized, neat, unlike my father who worked in creative chaos. I started with the filing cabinets. The first drawer was full of household documents, utilities, insurance, mortgage papers. The second drawer was financial, bank statements, investment portfolios. And then I found it. A folder labeled Estate Planning Confidential. Inside were copies of the amended will, along with correspondence between Nathan Pierce and my mother. I spread the papers across the desk, my hands shaking. The first letter was dated 8 months ago. "Alara, as discussed, I've drafted the amendment to Cormac's will per your specifications. The signature can be handled by your father, as we discussed. Once the document is filed with the county, the changes will be legally binding unless Cormac contests it directly, which he won't because he won't know. The asset distribution you requested is 70% to Varaya, 20% to you, 10% to a charitable trust, which you'll manage, 0% to Bryony. I've also included provisions that will make it difficult for Bryony to contest the will without significant legal resources should it come to that after Cormac's passing. As always, discretion is essential. Nathan." I couldn't breathe. The room spun. Jennifer grabbed my shoulder. "Bryony, sit down. Now." I collapsed into my father's desk chair. "My mother, she forged his signature, or had her father do it, and Nathan helped her." "Your grandfather?" "He died 3 years ago. He used to work for a bank." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "He knew how to forge signatures. Mom must have had him do it before he passed." Jennifer was reading over my shoulder. "Bryony, there's more." She pointed to another document, an email printout from Nathan Pierce's office account to my mother's personal email. "Alara, I've transferred another $30,000 to the account as we discussed. With Catherine's lawyers breathing down my neck after the divorce, I need you to be patient. The full amount will come once Cormac's estate is settled. Regarding Bryony, are you certain she suspects nothing? If she discovers the amendment before we're ready, this entire arrangement falls apart. We need to be careful, more careful than we've been. In." "He's been giving your mother money," Jennifer said, "and they're planning for your father's estate. That means they're waiting for him to die." The words hung in the air, impossible and terrible and true. My mother had written me out of my father's will, forged his signature, and was planning what? Hoping my father would have a heart attack? An accident? I thought about the dinner party, about how my mother had insisted I not tell Dad, about the 8 days in the hospital where she'd deliberately kept him away, About the bicycle accident when I was 7 years old. Jennifer, I need to tell you something. We sat in my father's office for another hour while I told her everything. About growing up feeling like I was always in the way. About my mother's coldness, her favoritism toward Varela, the way she seemed to resent my very existence. And then I told her about the bicycle. I was 7, we'd just moved to this house. There was a steep hill behind the property, and I loved riding my bike down it. One day, the brakes failed. I went flying down that hill, completely out of control. I crashed at the bottom and broke my arm. That's terrifying. At the time, I thought it was just an accident, a mechanical failure. I looked down at my hands. But I remember something else now. The day before, my mother had been working on my bike. She said the chain needed oiling. I didn't think anything of it. Jennifer's eyes widened. Bryony, you don't think... I don't know, but now, with everything else... I gestured at the papers spread across the desk. What if that wasn't an accident either? Before Jennifer could respond, we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. We both froze. That's my mom's car, I whispered. She's home early. We need to leave. Now. But I couldn't move, because I'd just seen something else in the stack of papers, a folder labeled Varela, Private. I grabbed it. Inside was a birth certificate. Varela's birth certificate. But something was wrong. The father's name line had been modified. There was whiteout covering the original entry and typed over it. Cormac Scott. Beneath the birth certificate was a handwritten note, yellowed with age. Nathan, I've taken care of the birth certificate. No one will ever know. Varela is Cormac's daughter as far as the world is concerned. Our daughter will have the life she deserves. I don't regret what happened between us, but we must be more careful now. Ilara. The date on the note was 25 years ago. My sister, my younger sister who'd been the golden child our entire lives, wasn't my father's daughter. She was Nathan Pierce's. Jennifer saw my face. What is it? I couldn't speak. I just handed her the note. Oh my God! Downstairs, we heard the front door open. My mother's voice called out, Varela, are you home? Jennifer grabbed my arm. We have to go. Back door. Now! She stuffed the documents into her purse, and we moved as quietly as we could toward the rear staircase. Every step felt like an eternity. My healing body screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept me moving. We made it to the kitchen just as we heard my mother's footsteps on the main stairs, heading to the second floor. Where's my phone? We heard her mutter. I swear I left it in the office. We slipped out the back door and into the autumn afternoon. Jennifer half carried me to the car, both of us breathing hard. Did we just... Jennifer started. Yes. Your mother is... Yes. And your sister is... Not my father's daughter. Yes. We sat in the car for a long moment, the stolen documents in Jennifer's lap. Bryony, Jennifer said softly. What are you going to do? I looked back at the house, the beautiful colonial with its perfect facade, hiding decades of lies. I'm going to tell my father everything, I said. And then I'm going to make sure my mother never hurts anyone again. But there was one more thing I needed first. One final piece of evidence that would make the truth undeniable. Jennifer, do you know any labs that do DNA testing, the kind that would hold up in court? She stared at me. You want to prove Varela isn't Cormac's daughter. I want to prove it, and I need to do it before my mother realizes what I know. This is going to destroy your family. I thought about 8 days in a coma, about 21 years of being invisible, about my mother's cold eyes and Varela's oblivious cruelty. My family destroyed itself a long time ago, I said. I'm just going to make sure everyone finally sees the truth. It took us 2 days to arrange everything. Jennifer had a friend who worked at a private lab in Boston, discreet, fast, and legally certified. We needed DNA samples from 3 people, my father, my sister, and Nathan Pierce. Getting my father's DNA was easy. He'd been staying at a hotel near the hospital, and when he visited me the next day, I asked if he could bring me one of his coffee cups. He looked puzzled but agreed. The cup, with his saliva on the rim, went into a sealed bag. Varela's was trickier. I convinced Jennifer to go back to the house, this time with a legitimate excuse. She called my mother, claiming I'd left my favorite cardigan in my old bedroom and asking if she could pick it up. My mother, surprisingly, agreed. While she was there, Jennifer went into Varea's bathroom and collected several strands of hair from her hairbrush. Varea had thick, honey blonde hair, completely unlike my father's dark coloring or my own light brown. Nathan Pierce's DNA was the hardest. We couldn't exactly walk into his law office and ask for a sample, but Jennifer remembered the article about his divorce. His ex-wife, she said. Catherine Pierce. If she was building a case against him, she might have information we could use. It was a long shot, but Jennifer found Catherine's contact information through a mutual acquaintance. She called and explained, not everything, but enough. Within an hour, Catherine Pierce had agreed to meet us at a coffee shop in Rittenhouse Square. Catherine was in her early 50s, elegant and sharp-eyed. She sat across from us, her hands wrapped around a cappuccino. "So, you're Alara Scott's daughter," she said, studying me. "I wondered if anyone in that family had a spine." "You know my mother?" "I know of her. Nathan talked about her constantly, the beautiful wife of his wealthy friend, the woman who understood him." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "I didn't realize he was talking about his mistress until I found the bank statements." "How long?" I asked. 26 years that I know of, probably longer." Catherine sipped her coffee. "I filed for divorce when I found out he'd been transferring money to an account in her name, $150,000 over 3 years. My lawyer is working on getting it back." "Mrs. Pierce," Jennifer said carefully, "we need a DNA sample from your ex-husband for a paternity test." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "Let me guess. The younger daughter?" I nodded. A slow smile spread across Catherine's face. "Well, that makes sense. Varea, that's her name, right? I saw photos of her at a charity event once. She looks just like Nathan's mother did at that age." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I had his DNA tested as part of the divorce proceedings. Hair samples, properly documented. My lawyer will kill me for this, but..." She pushed the envelope across the table. "Burn them down." "Nay." The lab results came back 3 days later. I was back in the hospital for a follow-up appointment when Jennifer arrived with a sealed envelope. My father was with me, having insisted on driving me to every medical appointment. "Bryony," Jennifer said quietly, "the results are here." Dad looked between us. "Results? What results?" I'd been dreading this moment, but there was no more hiding. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be really, really hard to hear." Over the next 30 minutes, I told him everything. About the forged will, about Nathan Pierce's letters to my mother, about the money transfers, about the bicycle accident when I was 7, and finally, about Varea. By the time I finished, my father's face was gray. He'd aged 10 years in half an hour. "You're saying your mother and Nathan, for 26 years. "Yes. And Varea is..." "We need to open the envelope to be sure." Dad took it with shaking hands. The lab had sent a formal report, complete with statistical analysis and legal certification. He read it once, then again, his eyes moving across the page as if hoping the words would change. Finally, he looked up. "Probability of paternity, 0%. His voice was hollow. "Varea isn't my daughter." Jennifer reached out to squeeze his hand, but he pulled away. He stood up abruptly, walked to the window, and stood there for a long time, his back to us. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. 25 years. I raised her. I loved her. I taught her to ride a bike, helped her with homework, walked her through her first heartbreak." He turned to face me, and I saw tears streaming down his cheeks. "And none of it was real." "Dad, no. Varea didn't know. She's a victim in this too." "But your mother knew, and Nathan knew, and they let me..." He couldn't finish. I got up from the examination table, ignoring the protests of my still healing body, and went to him. "Dad, I need you to focus. We have evidence now, the forged will, the DNA test, the letters. We can fix this, but we need to do it carefully." He wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. When he looked at me again, I saw something I'd never seen in my father before. Cold, calculated anger. "You're right," he said. We're going to fix this. All of it. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Richard, it's Cormac Scott. I need you in Philadelphia tomorrow morning. Family emergency. A pause. No, bring the full litigation team. We're going to war. Richard Thornton was my father's personal attorney, the one who'd helped him build his company from nothing. If anyone could navigate this legal nightmare, it was him. After Dad hung up, he sat back down and took my hand. Bryony, I am so sorry. I should have seen this. I should have protected you. You didn't know. I should have. He squeezed my hand gently. But I promise you, we're going to make this right. Your mother is going to face consequences, real consequences. And Viraya? Dad's expression softened, just slightly. Viraya is innocent. She didn't choose any of this. When the truth comes out, I'll make sure she knows that I don't blame her. Will you tell her that you know? About Nathan being her father? Yes. She deserves the truth. He stood up, his jaw set. In fact, I think it's time we had a family meeting. All of us together. Your mother, Viraya, Nathan, and Catherine too, if she'll come.
My name is
Dad,
Renata Martinez,
are you
and this is the
sure?
story of how I learned
This
that
is
sometimes
going
the
to
people
be-
who gave you
I'm
life are the
done
same
with
ones
secrets,
who try to
Bryony.
erase it.
Done with lies. It's time everyone faced the truth, no matter how ugly it is. Jennifer cleared her throat. Mr. Scott, I have one more thing you should see. She pulled out her phone and played a voice recording. We'd gone back to the house one more time, at night, when I'd hidden in my father's office while my mother and Nathan Pierce sat in the living room below, their voices carrying through the old house's thin walls. The recording was damning. We heard my mother's voice, clear as day. Cormac still doesn't suspect a thing. He thinks he's coming home to his perfect family. Nathan's response. What about Bryony? She's been asking questions. Bryony won't be a problem much longer. She's too weak to fight back. She never has been. My father's hands clenched into fists. When was this recorded? 2 nights ago, I said quietly. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were hard as stone. Schedule the meeting for this Saturday, at the house, 4 o'clock. He looked at me. Can you be there? Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the emotional devastation, I nodded. I wouldn't miss it. Saturday afternoon arrived with unnaturally perfect weather. The sky was a crisp October blue, the kind that made everything look sharper, more defined. I stood in front of my mother's house, the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to be invisible, and felt nothing but cold determination. Jennifer stood beside me, her hand on my elbow. You ready for this? No, but let's do it anyway. My father was already inside. He'd arrived an hour early with Richard Thornton, his attorney, to set up. The living room had been arranged like a courtroom, chairs in a semicircle, a table at the center where the evidence would be presented. Dad had insisted on doing this properly, with witnesses and documentation. Catherine Pierce arrived next, her silver Mercedes pulling smoothly into the driveway. She stepped out wearing a tailored navy suit, looking like she was headed to a deposition, which, in a way, she was. Mrs. Pierce, I said, extending my hand. Thank you for coming. Call me Catherine. She shook my hand firmly. And believe me, I wouldn't miss this for the world. Viraya's car appeared 10 minutes later. She'd been told this was a family meeting about important estate matters, which was technically true. She stepped out looking confused and slightly annoyed, her phone in one hand. Bryony, what are you doing here? I thought you were still recovering. Her eyes swept over my face, still bruised, my arm still in a brace. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe. Or concern. I am recovering, but this couldn't wait. What's going on? You'll find out. Mom and Nathan are inside. Her confusion deepened. Nathan Pierce? Why is he— Inside, Viraya, please. The last to arrive was Nathan Pierce himself. He pulled up in a black Lexus, looking every inch the successful attorney. Expensive suit, perfect hair, confident stride. But when he saw Catherine standing on the porch, he stopped dead. Catherine, what are you doing here? Hello, Nathan. I was invited. This is a private family matter. Apparently, it's your family, too. Her smile was sharp as glass. Nathan's confident facade cracked slightly. He looked at me, then at the house, calculating. For a second, I thought he might turn around and leave, but pride, or perhaps stupidity, won out. He walked inside. The living room fell silent when we all entered. My mother sat on the cream-colored sofa, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. But I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her knees. "Cormac, what is this about?" she asked, her voice level. "And why is Catherine Pierce in my home?" "It's not your home, Alara." My father stood by the fireplace, Richard Thornton beside him. "It's our home. For now. We'll address that soon enough." Nathan moved to sit beside my mother, but Dad held up a hand. "Nathan, you'll sit over there." He pointed to a chair across the room. "Separated." "Cormac, I don't know what you think—" "Sit down." The command in my father's voice was absolute. Nathan sat. Varaya looked around the room, her confusion morphing into fear. "Dad, what's happening?" "Sit beside your sister, sweetheart. Please." She did, sinking into the chair next to me. I felt her hand find mine, trembling slightly. Whatever was coming, some part of her sensed it would be bad. My father took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. 25 years ago, I thought I had everything. A successful business, a beautiful wife, and a daughter I loved more than life itself. He looked at me, and I saw the pain in his eyes. Bryony was everything to me. Curious, kind, always trying to help. I called her my strong girl. Alara shifted uncomfortably. 3 years later, Viraya was born. Dad's gaze moved to my sister. And I felt my heart double in size. 2 daughters. I was the luckiest man alive. "Dad, what?" Viraya started. "Let me finish." He pulled out the first document, the forged will. 6 months ago, an amendment was filed to my estate planning documents. According to this amendment, 70% of my assets would go to Viraya upon my death, 20% to Alara, 10% to a charitable trust managed by Alara, and 0% to Bryony. The room went still. "I never signed this document." Viraya gasped. My mother's face remained impassive. "The signature is a forgery," Richard Thornton added, stepping forward. "We've had it analyzed by 3 independent experts. The consensus is that it was forged by someone with banking experience who had access to multiple examples of Mr. Scott's signature." Dad looked at Mom. "Your father worked in banking for 30 years. He knew how to replicate signatures for fraud prevention training, and according to the timeline, this forgery was created 2 months before he died." "That's ridiculous," Alara said, but her voice wavered. "Why would I—" "Because you wanted Bryony gone from our lives." Dad's voice hardened. "Just like you've wanted her gone since the day she was born." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. "Cormac, you're being dramatic." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The recording filled the room. My mother's voice, clear and damning. "Bryony won't be a problem much longer. She's too weak to fight back. She never has been." Viraya's hand tightened around mine. "Mom, what is that?" Alara's face had gone pale. "That's taken out of context." "Here's more context." Dad played another section. Nathan's voice this time. "What about the accident? The truck?" And my mother. "That was fortune, not planning, though I can't say I was upset." Viraya stood up abruptly. "Stop. Stop this." "What accident?" I spoke for the first time. 3 weeks ago, I was hit by a truck. I was in a coma for 8 days. Mom told the hospital not to contact Dad. She said I had the flu. My sister turned to stare at our mother, her face a mask of horror. You didn't tell Dad? Bryony almost died and you didn't—" "She was fine," Alara said quickly. "The doctors said she would recover. There was no need to worry your father with—" "She was in a coma!" Viraya's voice cracked. "How is that fine?" "Sit down, Viraya," Dad said gently. "There's more." "I don't want to hear more." "You need to." She sank back into her chair, tears already streaming down her face. Dad pulled out the next document, the bank statements showing transfers from Nathan to Alara. $150,000 over 3 years. Nathan Pierce has been giving your mother money, Dad said. Money he embezzled from his marriage to Catherine, which is why she's here. She's currently suing him for the full amount plus damages. Catherine nodded coolly. Every penny. Nathan finally spoke. Cormac, let me explain. No, you don't get to explain. You get to listen. Dad's hands were shaking now, but his voice remained steady. Because we're not done yet. He pulled out the final document, the birth certificate. Viraya, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you changes nothing about how I feel about you. You are my daughter. You will always be my daughter, but you deserve to know the truth. Dad, you're scaring me. The man who raised you isn't the man who fathered you. The words landed like a bomb. Viraya stared at him, not comprehending. What? Your mother had an affair 26 years ago. Nathan Pierce is your biological father. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Viraya made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. She turned to look at Nathan, really look at him, and I saw the moment recognition hit. The shape of her nose, the color of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. No, she whispered. No, that can't be. Dad handed her the DNA test results. She read them once, twice, her hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. Probability of paternity, 0%, she read aloud. Then she looked up at Nathan. You're my father? Nathan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Viraya, Were you ever going to tell me? Her voice rose. Were either of you ever going to tell me the truth? Alara finally moved, reaching toward her daughter. Sweetheart, we were protecting you. Protecting me? Viraya jerked away. From what? The truth? You let me grow up thinking. She couldn't finish. She turned to Dad, to Cormac, who'd raised her. Did you know? I found out 1 week ago, the same time Bryony did. Viraya looked at me, betrayal and confusion warring in her expression. You knew? I found out by accident, I said quietly. I wasn't keeping it from you, Viraya. I wanted you to hear it from Dad. She stood up, stumbling slightly. I can't. I need to. She ran from the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the slam of a door. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Cormac turned to Alara and Nathan. His voice, when he spoke, was terrifyingly calm. Here's what's going to happen. First, Alara, I'm filing for divorce on Monday. The grounds are fraud, adultery, and emotional abuse. You'll get exactly what the prenuptial agreement stipulates, which, as you may recall, is not much. Alara's face crumpled. Cormac, please! This house will be sold. 50% to me, 50% to you. That's more than generous considering you tried to steal my entire estate. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my concern anymore. He turned to Nathan. As for you, I'm filing a complaint with the State Bar Association. Forging legal documents, embezzling marital assets, fraud. Richard assures me you'll be disbarred. Catherine smiled thinly. And I'll have my full settlement, plus damages for emotional distress. Nathan's face had gone gray. Catherine, please. We can work this out. We're done working things out, Nathan. We've been done for a year. This is just making it official. Cormac pulled out one final document. This is a cease and desist order. Nathan, you are to have no contact with Viraya unless she initiates it. No calls, no letters, no surprise visits. If you violate this, I will file a restraining order. She's my daughter. You lost the right to call her that 25 years ago when you decided keeping a secret was more important than being a father. Dad's voice finally broke on that last word. He turned away, composing himself. Richard Thornton stepped forward, all business. Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Scott, you'll both be receiving legal documentation in the next 48 hours. I suggest you retain counsel. Good day. It was a dismissal. Nathan stood slowly, looked like he might say something, then thought better of it. He walked out without a word. My mother stayed seated, her perfect posture finally collapsing. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Cormac, she whispered. Please don't do this. I can explain. There's nothing to explain, Alara. I finally see you clearly. He walked to the door, then paused. You know what the worst part is? I don't think you ever loved me. I think you loved what I could provide. And when that wasn't enough, you found Nathan. And when Bryony needed you most, you couldn't even pretend to care. I tried, she said, and for the first time I heard something raw in her voice. I tried to love her, but every time I looked at her, I saw you, choosing her over me, holding her instead of me, loving her more than me. The admission hung in the air. She was a baby, Alara, an innocent child. I know. My mother's voice broke. I know that, but I couldn't separate the feeling from the fact. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. I stood up, my body aching but my mind clear. I walked over to where my mother sat and looked down at her. I don't forgive you, I said quietly. I don't think I ever will. But I hope someday you find a way to forgive yourself. Because this? I gestured at the room, at the wreckage of our family. This is what your choices created. She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Bryony, I'm so... Don't apologize. It's too late for that. I turned to Dad. Can we go? I want to check on Viraya. I found her in her old bedroom, curled up on the bed, crying into a pillow. When I knocked softly, she didn't tell me to leave. I sat on the edge of the bed, my movements careful. Can I stay? She nodded without looking at me. We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the autumn sun was setting, painting the room in shades of orange and gold. Finally, Viraya spoke, her voice muffled by the pillow. I'm sorry. For what? For everything. For being awful to you. For never seeing what Mom was doing. For taking your place in Dad's, in Cormac's will. She sat up, her face blotchy and swollen. I never asked for any of this. I didn't know. I know you didn't. I feel like my entire life is a lie. Everything I thought I knew about who I am, where I come from, it's all wrong. I reached out and took her hand. Not everything. Dad, Cormac, he raised you. He loves you. That's not a lie. But he's not my real father. He's the only father you've ever had. Biology doesn't change that. I squeezed her hand. And Viraya? You're not responsible for what Mom and Nathan did. You're a victim in this too. She started crying again, and this time I pulled her into a hug. We sat there together, two sisters who'd been pitted against each other for 25 years, finally on the same side. 3 months later, Boston in February was bitterly cold, but I'd never felt warmer. The apartment Dad and I shared near Charles Gate Park was small, a 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a temperamental heating system, but it was ours. Dad had taken a position as a senior advisor at the Boston office of his firm. Less money, less prestige, but regular hours and no travel. He'd made his choice clear. His career could adapt. His daughter couldn't wait. I'd transferred to Boston General Hospital, working 3 12-hour shifts a week in the ICU. The staff there had welcomed me without question, and slowly, I was remembering what it felt like to be valued for my work, not just my usefulness. It was a Saturday evening, and the apartment was full of people. Jennifer had driven up from Philadelphia with Daniel and Laura. They'd brought homemade lasagna and stories from the hospital that made everyone laugh. Dr. Roberts had sent a care package, Boston guidebooks, and a gift card to a local bookstore. Dad stood in the tiny kitchen, attempting to make garlic bread without burning it. He was not a natural cook, but he tried with endearing determination. "How's this look?" he called out, holding up a piece of bread that was definitely too dark on one side. "Perfect, Dad," I lied, grinning. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Viraya stood there with an overnight bag, her cheeks pink from the cold. "Hey," she said shyly. "Is the offer still open? To stay the weekend?" "Always." I pulled her into a hug. She'd moved to Brooklyn after everything fell apart, starting her own interior design consultancy. We texted regularly now, slowly rebuilding a relationship that had never really existed before. It was awkward sometimes, but it was real. Over dinner, crowded around the small table, Dad raised his glass of wine. "I want to say something," he began. A year ago, I thought I had a family. A perfect family, or so it seemed. He paused, his eyes finding mine. I was wrong. That wasn't a family. It was a performance. Fireya shifted uncomfortably, but Dad smiled at her. But now? Now I have something real. A daughter who almost died because she was too kind to say no. He nodded at me. Another daughter who's rebuilding her life with courage I can barely comprehend. He nodded at Fireya. And friends who showed up when family didn't. Jennifer raised her glass. To real family. To real family, we echoed. Later that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, I went downstairs to check the mailbox. Tucked between bills and catalogs was a plain envelope with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, careful. I brought it back upstairs and sat at the kitchen table, staring at it for a long time before opening. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Bryony, I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I won't make excuses, though I could give you many, about postpartum depression, about feeling abandoned, about the slow decay of a marriage I thought would save me. The truth is simpler and more terrible. I was jealous of you. From the moment you were born, your father looked at you with a love I'd never seen him show me, and instead of being happy, instead of loving my own daughter, I resented you. I told myself I was protecting Fireya, that I was being a good mother to her, even if I failed with you. But now I see the truth. I was just trying to hurt your father by hurting you, and Fireya paid the price too. Both my daughters paid for my cruelty. I've started therapy. It won't undo what I did, but maybe it will help me understand why I did it. The psychiatrist says I have something called maternal ambivalence disorder, a pathological inability to bond with a child. It started after you were born and never truly went away. None of this excuses what I did. Nothing can. I just wanted you to know. When you were in that hospital, dying, and I didn't come, it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because if I went to see you, I would have had to face what I'd become, a mother who'd abandoned her child when she needed her most. I was a coward. I still am. I don't expect anything from you. I don't expect contact or reconciliation or even acknowledgement of this letter. I just needed you to know you were never the problem. It was always me. I hope you find happiness, Bryony. Real happiness, not the performance I forced you to live. Your mother. I read it twice, then set it down. Dad appeared in the doorway, wearing his bathrobe. Can't sleep? Letter from Mom. He sat down across from me. You okay? I thought about it, really thought about it. A year ago, a letter like this would have destroyed me. I would have cried, agonized, wondered if I should reach out, if I should try one more time. But now? Yeah, I said. I'm okay. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the trash can and dropped it in. Dad watched but didn't comment. She tried to explain, I said. Postpartum depression, some disorder, therapy, and maybe it's all true. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she couldn't help it. But I can't fix her. I can't save her. And I'm done trying. I sat back down. For 28 years, I tried to earn her love. I made myself smaller, quieter, more useful. And it was never enough. It was never going to be enough. Dad reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You were working, trying to provide for us. You thought we were okay. I should have looked closer. Maybe, but we're looking now. Both of us. I squeezed his hand. And Dad? I don't need her anymore. I have you. I have Fireya, the real Fireya, not the one Mom created. I have Jennifer and the team at the hospital. I have a life that's actually mine. You do. He smiled and it reached his eyes. So, what do you want to do tomorrow? It's your day off. I was thinking, maybe we could go look at bookshelves. You mentioned wanting to build one. For your medical journals? For everything. Books, photos, memories, the good ones. I like that idea. We sat in the quiet kitchen, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of sirens from the street below. Outside, snow had started to fall, soft and silent. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who'd worked herself to exhaustion trying to earn love that was never coming, the one who'd almost died because she was too afraid to disappoint people who didn't care about her. That girl was gone. She'd died on a rainy street in Philadelphia, and someone new had woken up in her place. Someone who knew the difference between family and blood. Someone who understood that love isn't something you earn. It's something that's freely given, or it's not love at all. Someone who was finally, truly free. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah, sweetheart." "Thank you for choosing me." His eyes got misty. "Always, Bryony. Always." And in that moment, in that tiny kitchen in Boston with snow falling outside and my father's hand in mine, I knew something for certain. I was home. Not because of the apartment or the city or even the people, but because for the first time in my life, I was with people who saw me, really saw me, and chose to stay. That's what family is. Not the people who share your blood, but the people who choose to stand beside you when everything falls apart. The people who show up, the people who stay. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Bryony's story isn't just about betrayal or family drama. It's about learning that you don't have to earn love from people who will never give it. It's about understanding that sometimes the family you choose is more real than the family you're born into. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've ever worked yourself to exhaustion trying to prove your worth to people who refused to see it, this story is for you. You are not responsible for other people's inability to love you. You are not too much or too little. You are worthy exactly as you are. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is walking away from people who make you feel small and building a life with people who help you grow. Thank you for listening to Bryony's journey. If her story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you deserve to be chosen, not tolerated, not accommodated, chosen.